Hi everyone, and welcome to this event that has been curated by BFI Film Academy young programmers Jess Haygarth, Sam Judd, and myself, Maya Svekyanaki. Thank you everyone for tuning in. We will now screen the short film Dark Red by director Eugene Mel. We will be screening the film first without sound, then without image, and finally in its unaltered form in order to show the experience of watching a film without one of your senses. We will now play the film Dark Red without sound. We will now play the film Dark Red without image.
I didn't have anyone to talk about this with, so I'll try it this way. Hi, Mum. Just want to say a couple things before I go. Don't know where to start. I'd like to say thank you for being my mother. Thank you for taking me to places and caring about me.
Come on! Lamar, where are you going? Lamar!
Are you okay?
Mom, I don't think you'll understand, but I'm changing. I can't ignore it anymore. I don't want to leave you, but I guess it's the only thing I can do. gonna miss you when I go out alone. But I have to accept who I am now. Don't think I'll be able to see you again. So I just want to say my last goodbye. I love you lots, Mum.
Lamar? Somebody help!
We will now play the film Dark Red in its unaltered form.
I didn't have anyone to talk about this with, so I'll try it this way. Hi, Mum. Just want to say a couple things before I go. Don't know where to start. I'd like to say thank you for being my mother. Thank you for taking me to places and caring about me.
Lamar, where you going?
Are you okay?
I don't think you'll understand. But I'm changing. I can't ignore it anymore. I don't want to leave you. I guess it's the only thing I can do. I'm really gonna miss you when I go out alone. But I have to accept who I am now. Don't think I'll be able to see you again. So I just want to say my last goodbye. I love you lots, Mum.
Lamar? Somebody help!
Thank you everyone for watching the film and for tuning into the panel discussion. I would now like to introduce you our lovely guests, director, screenwriter, and producer Justin Edgar, stage and television actor Sophie Leigh Stone, and our own young programmer and filmmaker Sam Judd.
So Justin is a screenwriter and producer, having founded his own film production company, 104 Films, that specializes in the representation of disabled and disadvantaged talent, both on screen and behind the camera. Hi, Justin. How are you today?
Hi, I'm very good, thanks, Maya.
I'd like to ask you how it made you feel to watch the film in these alternative screenings without sound and then alternatively without image.
In a word, it made me feel confused, which is the way a lot of deaf and visually impaired people feel when they watch television. There's a lot more audio description and subtitling than there used to be, but there's not enough. And it does lead to a lot of confusion, and we're not quite sure what we're looking at. I think looking at a short film like this, you never know what you're watching when you first sit down and watch a short film anyway. That made it even more confusing. I wasn't sure if I was watching a trailer or what was going on, but I have to say I was really intrigued by the concept of this short film, and wanted to know more. So the sensory deprivation was irritating, actually, and confusing. Yeah, and I think we have to think about other types of making screen content accessible. It's not just about sensory disabilities. We also have to think about people with mental health issues, all kinds of other people who are British Sign Language users. We have to think about all other types of accessibility to make content completely accessible.
Thank you, Justin. Yes, we're just trying to explore and show the audience how it is to experience a sensory medium such as film while being deprived of one of your senses. Justin, you've also prepared a short clip from us from your more recent film, Unaltered, and we can play the clip now.
No, not little pushes. Do big, hard pushes like that. You'll get a smoother. Yeah. Try. Good.
How'd you turn it?
You one wheel back, one wheel forward. Yeah, yeah, there you go. Yeah.
It's like rowing.
What?
It's like rowing. You know, one oar forward, one oar back.
Exactly the same. So you need to learn how to do a wheelie. Find your centre of gravity, okay? That's the key to everything.
Like this?
Mm-hmm.
Oh!
Oh!
Hey, what's going on? Are you all right?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Studio medic, too much studio medic, too.
Cheers.
Are you all right?
Mate, I'm fine.
You sure?
Yeah.
Thank you for this film, Justin. Could you let us know where could one watch this short?
The short was released as part of a compilation of short films called The Uncertain Kingdom. It used to be released in cinemas, but sadly fell victim to COVID back in April. But it's now on a lot of different platforms. You can watch it on BFI Player and Curzon On Demand, iTunes, things like that, as part of the Uncertain Kingdom anthology.
Cool. Thank you very much. Our next panelist is Sophie Leigh Stone. Hi, Sophie. Sophie is the first deaf actor to be accepted to RADA, and since then she has been a plethora of theatre productions at the National Theatre, as well as very popular series such as The Crown and Doctor Who. Sophie can talk to us a bit about her experience of rising as an actor and establishing herself in one of the toughest industries out there. Hi, Sophie. Really good to see you and to have you on the panel. I'd also like to ask you the same question. How does it make you feel to watch this film in these three different ways? What do you think you'd gain from this experience?
It's funny because watching it for the first time with no sound and with no subtitles just reminded me of the TV and film that I used to watch when I was growing up, because back then in the 80s they didn't have subtitles, so I used to just watch for the visuals. So you see sort of the lighting, the story and the relationships that people have with each other, so you kind of get used to trying to piece things together and try and figure out the story without actually having any sound or information given to you. So I'm kind of used to that, but I'm sure there's been like many years where I've had subtitles and I've got used to being able to go and see films and stuff with captions and understand. But watching that just took me back to watching it with a different lens, I suppose. So I'm seeing the lighting, I'm seeing how the storyboard might have been set up at the beginning. So yeah, it just feels like you get back to your roots almost. But then watching it with no visuals and blank screen and just trying to work out what I can hear, I kind of felt excluded, and I probably would have switched off. I can feel and hear some bits of, you know, the tension rising, but not fully engaged or understanding what's going on. So I probably would have switched off and removed myself from the story a little bit. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for this, Sophie. I know that you've also prepared a video introduction of your work. So I think it's from the film retreat, the clip that you send us. So we can show, yeah? Great, we can show the film now.
Hello? I don't know if there's anybody there. I can't hear you, but please, just listen to me. I need help. There's a man, he's really badly hurt. Something bad is going to happen. I don't know what to do. I don't even know if you can hear me. Just please, if you can hear me, just come.
We're sorry. The number you have dialed is no longer in service. Please direct all inquiries to your regional emergency liaison department. We're sorry. The number
He needs help.
Thank you, Sophie. There was a lot of tension on that clip. Sam Judd graduated from the Northern Film School in 2019. Along with writing and directing his own short films, he has also undertaken various roles in film sets. He is additionally one of the BFI Film Academy Young Programmers. Along with helping in curating the event, Sam is also taking part in the panel and will talk to us about his first steps as a filmmaker and what support he has received so far by the industry. Sam, it's really lovely to see you in this panel as you represent a large group of disabled filmmakers, and you can provide us with a lot of insights of how to take advantage of your disability to make art. Would you like to let us know how the screening made you feel?
It is slightly different for me because, of course, I was involved in the organization of this event, so I watched the film before. However, I have never seen it in that order before. I found it quite eye-opening, stepping into the shoes of someone without use of sight, then someone without use of their hearing, showing how while film and TV are great and can do a lot of good, they can be isolating for certain groups of people, as well as, of course, the obvious lack of representation on screen. For my next project, I will think about how I can work around those sensory issues the screening just demonstrated. I had a brain stem stroke at the age of 4. While I am physically disabled and I can understand the challenges, I can't imagine not having use of a sense.
Thank you, Sam. Yes, it is true that film and TV can't be exclusive at times. And at this event, we're aiming to propose alternative ways for filmmakers to make art that is more inclusive and open to everyone. And I would really like to show a video from your own film, Liberator. So if we can play the clip from Liberator now.
No talking. No watching where they are heading to. Just click, click. The sad thing is they don't need the devices.
Thank you, Sam. I really like that line, that they don't need their devices. It's a sad truth. Justin, Sophie, and Sam, thank you so much for joining us today. I would like to discuss with you the possibilities of disabled people to create and provoke with their art and portray disability as an alternative way of understanding the world. I would like to explore together with you how disabled filmmakers are proposing a distinctive approach to filmmaking and how this needs to be seen by more people. Sam, I would like to ask you first, which aspects of being disabled do you think could be of benefit to you and give an alternative perspectives to someone's filmmaking practice?
A different perspective, different stories. The majority of certainly well-known established talent, both on and off screen, all tend to be white, middle class, able-bodied men. Much as they can make some great art, and that should be acknowledged. Work by underrepresented groups tend to look at the world slightly differently. Spike Lee is a good example for a black filmmaker who sheds light on issues important to his community in ways that white audiences have often never even thought of. Same for disabled filmmakers and artists. That, I think, comes across well in some of Justin's work. Additionally, I feel disabled artists can be more adept at problem solving. There are things you can't do with your disability and limitations. That's the sad truth. But the key is finding a way around it, because there is almost always a way. That translates into all aspects of life, certainly in my experience.
This is very inspirational, Sam, and I do also believe that disabled filmmakers can be more adept at problem solving and find creative ways to tell their stories. So the industry on their side should always strive to support these alternative perspectives. Justin, I would like to ask about you. How do you think your disability has affected your creative practice? And how could one use their disability in their favor to make distinctive and original films?
Well, I think that what being disabled gives you is a sense of the other, of being an outsider. And I think that's what's really exciting about being a disabled person. It's about the way you see the world in a different way. And that could be because of a sensory impairment. It could be because of a physical impairment. It could be because of your mental health issues. But how do you use that? And this is a question you have to ask yourself as a disabled filmmaker. How do you use that disability to see the world in a different way? And what do you want to say as well? What do you want to say as a disabled filmmaker? These are terrible and challenging times for disabled people. You know, we have 2/3 of the deaths from COVID-19 in the last 6 months have been amongst the disabled community. The British Medical Journal says that 120,000 people have died in the last 10 years due to austerity in this country. So disabled people are under existential threat. That's what drives a lot of my work. I want to see more work which tells people about that and says, what are we going to do about it? You know, and we have to, as filmmakers, we have to address the big issues facing disabled people.
And what steps do you take as a filmmaker, screenwriter, to ensure that disabled film viewers can enjoy your work?
Well, it's interesting because there is currently no funding in the UK for making films accessible. There's no funding, zero funding basically for that. So you have to be innovative. I mean, I got a post-production company to sponsor my latest film so that we could subtitle it and do audio description on the film. So it's very difficult to get that out there. I think in terms of other arts arenas, the Arts Council, for example, are very good at making exhibitions of work accessible in a way that perhaps the film industry aren't. And what the film industry have got to do is realise how important a disabled audience is. And there were Sophie will correct me, but I believe there are about 250,000 British Sign Language users in this country. We have approximately 9 million disabled people in this country. I think 70% of those have either mental health issues or are hard of hearing. So there's a huge, huge potential audience if you make your films accessible for those audiences. And I think we need to explore ways of doing that and ways of funding that as an industry.
Thank you, Justin. Yes, I believe you're right. I mean, the numbers are very high. And there is definitely a need. Sam, I would like to ask you as a filmmaker, where does your disability sit? Do you think it defines your work?
No, I wouldn't say it defines my filmmaking. I'm a filmmaker first and foremost. My disability does play an important role in my work, though, and that shouldn't be ignored. As you can see from the clip Maya just played, I have interwoven my disability directly and indirectly into some of my films. With some of my drama films in particular, even though some of them aren't even about disability, one can still pick up on ideas and themes relating to disability. The freaky part is when I am not even aware I am doing it, it is subconscious. One of the biggest themes I keep coming back to is the idea of the outsider, someone on the fringes of society looking in. I'm sure everyone with a disability can relate to that on some level.
It's very inspiring what you're saying, Sam, for both disabled and non-disabled filmmakers. It's inspiring to see that you're using your disability as a source of inspiration. And I'm a big fan of your work and your stand-up comedy as well, where you actually talk about this unique experience and perspective of yours. And I think it is important for your voice to be heard. And thank you for making this art, because it is very important. Sophie, hi, I'd like to return to you. I know that you can give us a bit of background on how you started working in the industry and some advice for disabled actors that would like to take their first steps in the field. So I have a few questions for you. So how does your disability influence your acting? How do you use your instinct and your intuition to work on set? And is your perception of the film set affected by your disability?
Quite a few questions there. I think because I work mainly in mainstream, so a lot of the time I had to sort of explain my perspective that might be a bit different from a script that may be written by, a hearing person with a hearing perspective. If it's written for a deaf character, we might have these discussions and say, well, maybe on this line I could do one of these sort of options, actions, that play on a perspective that maybe isn't quite understood when it's written. So you have these discussions with, filmmakers, the sound people. Recently I worked on Casualty, and there was a group of people talking about sound, and there was some contributions from some of the deaf actors that were on set, and the contributions were, this is what it's like for me. My hearing aids make these specific sounds, and so you were, even though you're deaf, you're still sort of feedbacking what it's like for because if the camera is in POV, so it's like your point of view, you want the sounds to be authentic to the deaf person's experience. So having all of those options meant that they could play with sound from our perspective, and that mattered a lot, because a lot of deaf audiences that were watching afterwards were saying, yeah, that's what it sounds like. For the first time, it wasn't the standard, muffled underwater sounds that they just put on all films or all TV programs. That's just like stereotyped deaf sound, and actually to try and play with something else by listening to us and asking us what it's like, we can feedback and enhance the experience that the audience will have, and maybe a bit of empathy that the audience might have. It's like, oh, they actually hear maybe too much sometimes, rather than, oh, just silence. It's a cop-out to just fall on what you think you know about deafness or disability, rather than asking people who actually experience it. So yeah, and you can talk about instincts and intuition, but really it's about listening to the other person. And if you have that discussion with the other actors or the director about what they want the character to achieve, or what they want the scene to complete or to be about, then that discussion helps the actor, you know, have that relationship with another actor, and it shouldn't really factor in your disability. The only time your disability will come into account is the authentic experience. And I think that when you cast actual deaf or disabled actors, they will naturally have that, and everything else is acting. Whereas when you cast non-disabled people, they're having to perform a disability and they call that acting, and that's very frustrating for a lot of actors to just feel like, oh, we're not acting, so we're just playing ourselves. And that's an offence, you know. It's just saying that we don't have the experience or the instincts or the capability to perform in front of a camera or on stage as another person's life. But what we will bring is our survival tactics, our, you know, the way that we look at someone, the way that we respond to someone, you know, even from like small nuances of breath in a deaf person is very different to the way that a hearing person breathes, and you won't get that unless you know that experience, unless you have that. So trying to explain that to society now is a fight. And so if you put your trust into a director or a team, you would hope that those conversations would be allowed to be had and that they will listen to you.
And do you think those conversations are happening better when in theater or in a film set? Do you think there's more time in theater to have those conversations and to show yourself and find a way of working that works best for all of you, for all the crew?
Yeah, I do. And I think sort of the magic with theatre is that you can almost play anyone. There's permission, whereas TV kind of have to sound hearing. You have to look like you can walk. You have to, you know, there's more sort of limitations about the roles you can play and, you know, the jobs that you can do within the industry in TV. And, you know, that's changing slowly. They're making it happen. Like, for example, you have a person who non-disabled and, you know, walks, has full use of their legs, but they might be in the film, they might have an explosion and they lose their legs, and then they use CGI to remove their legs to make it look like they're, you know, they're in a wheelchair for the rest of the film with no legs. But there's the question of why couldn't it be the other way around? So somebody who doesn't have legs could have CGI to make it look like, you know, they started that way, and then for the rest of the film be themselves and perform the character. So there's those questions about morally, who are you casting and why, and whose story is it? So yeah.
So from your side, could you name a few institutions that actually help young actors with disabilities to develop their career?
Yeah. I know a few theatre companies, but I think because there's so many limited opportunities for deaf and disabled to have training in like drama schools and institutions, that finding mainstream theatre groups can or even, you know, specialised theatre groups can help support and promote and introduce you to the right people, so that you will get into the profession. But the main thing is that you have some form of training, and I've always found that Grey Eye and definitely theatre, sort of Ramps on the Moon project, there's Birds of Paradise in Scotland, and the RCS, the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland. They all have sort of areas of like maybe summer school or groups or like a hub where you can have some form of training from people who are already in the profession coming in to sort of pass and, you know, pass down their experiences and help promote sort of better opportunities for deaf and disabled actors, really. And I've always found that if you know the right people, you'll be introduced to the right people, and you work your way up. So even if you don't have training, it's experience that makes you where you end up, really.
We will include all those institutions that you mentioned on a document that we'll be sending to our audience at the end of our event, so they can get access as well. Sam, I'd like to ask you, how did you decide to get into film? And did your disability influence your decision in becoming a filmmaker?
I have always been interested in film and TV from a really young age. However, I feel that my stroke amplified my interest, gave me a way of escaping my situation and something else to focus on. My family are big film fans as well, and they really fueled my passion. Then when I was in my teens, I started making my own short films. Yes, I would say it influenced my decision, but not the only factor.
And what steps did you take in order to get involved with filmmaking and to produce your own films? And you also work as a programmer. So I'd like to know how did it all start?
I made my most recent films through the Northern Film School. For my earlier work, I tended to just make them off my own back, either using my own camera or borrowing one from school, college, a friend. For one film, I even shot a scene on an iPhone for the sole reason that the camera ran out of batteries. It turned out okay. That is proof, though, that you don't need really highbrow equipment to make a film. You just need something to film and something else to edit. An idea of some kind is also helpful. That is the bare minimum. You don't even necessarily need actors for some kinds of films. The most important thing is getting your work seen and out there. You also asked about programming. My first job in film programming was helping to program Leeds Young Film Festival. That involved watching films from all across the globe and doing a film on each. I then did similar work for the BFI. It is a great way of getting festival experience if you struggle with the more practical, hands-on roles on a film set.
Yes, it's true that programming is more accessible, and but I really do agree with your idea that the first step to make a film is having the desire to do so and to make the extra mile. But also, of course, it's very important to have support from the industry. And I'd like to ask you if there was enough support for you to develop your skills and your creative practice, and if there was, where did you get support from?
I have found there aren't huge amounts of support for people with additional needs. I still come across prejudice and really annoying problems which I have to overcome, like networking sessions being up a flight of stairs. However, it is getting better even since I graduated in 2019. As I mentioned, I made my later films through the Northern Film School. The film school were brilliant, particularly since it was a learning curve for them as well, having someone with the severity of my needs. They were also great for accessing other opportunities. In my second year, I got the opportunity to direct a short educational video for the National Centre of Diversity. There are also schemes directly targeting filmmakers with disabilities that are constantly springing up. As a starting point, I suggest looking at screen skills. It is also worth checking social media for any other opportunities. Networking is also a great resource. Even if it's just a chat over a pint, it is better than nothing. It will help you get yourself out there and known.
Yes, you're right, Sam. Networking is very important in the industry. So I'd like to ask you, do you have any other advice for young filmmakers that would like to take their first steps into the industry?
Think creatively. If you find it hard to do more physical roles on a film set such as runner or grip, could you talk to someone about making reasonable adjustments for you? Or could you do another role which is less physically demanding? Could you do something else in the film industry to gain experience and knowledge? I talked about film programming, but there is also film criticism. They are, among other less conventional ways of getting experience and those much needed contacts. I touched on it, but my other bit of advice is just make a film. Get a sample of your work out there. You never know who might see it. One of my tutors once said to me, the industry is what you make it. That was good advice. Although it is all very well trying to find opportunities, you sometimes have to take a gamble and make your own. At least try. You will either succeed or fail. That brings me on to my last piece of advice. Roll with the punches. You will face challenges. Anyone who is breaking into the film industry, but particularly people with additional needs, will encounter barriers. Not to sound too much like Rocky, the trick is then picking yourself up, thinking, is there a way around this? If not, just move on to the next thing. If you do feel though it's discrimination, then you should tell someone. Hopefully, by being in the industry and being a presence, you can help change attitudes.
You're so right, Sam. Thank you so much for your input. It is very important to vocalize your concern and talk to people. Also, as Sophie aforementioned, you need to be able to communicate your rights and to also your perspective. I would just like to ask you, how did your career as a director on TV for BBC commence? And if it was difficult for you to find work in the industry, being diagnosed as hard of hearing in an early age?
Well, I went to university much as Sam did, and did a degree in film and television. And after graduating, there weren't a lot of opportunities at the time. Actually, it was kind of the late 90s. So I just made a short film, and it was before the advent of digital technology. So you had to shoot films on film, and it was harder to get the materials and the equipment together that you needed. So we used these things called short ends, which are the old bits of film that left over after big feature film or TV drama shoot on 16mm. And we got a 16mm camera for free, which was so noisy we had to throw a blanket over it. And it was just really, really difficult to get it together. But anyway, I made a film, and the film won an award, and that's what brought me to the notice of the producers, and that's how I was able to get my first job directing soap operas for the BBC, and then subsequently the next film, the first film, which I made now 20 years ago. But it was difficult, and interestingly, one of the things that happened to me when I was on Doctors is one of the first people I met was a director called John Maidens, who was also hard of hearing. So we were working on Doctors at the same time. And I think it's interesting because there are much fewer opportunities for disabled directors now, despite a lot of talk in the industry and trying to get people, into jobs. There's actually, I don't think, as much opportunity as there was then.
Thank you, Justin. Yes, I think it's time to wrap up now, but I would like to let our audiences know that we will have a document that will have other ideas and more useful resources about what we have discussed today, and about platforms that are available for young filmmakers to submit their films, and ways to get involved in production and to develop your skills as a disabled filmmaker. Justin, Sam, and Sophie, thank you so much for taking the time to answer those questions and contribute all this useful advice to our audience. I think you've provided a very good foundation for filmmakers to get inspiration from. And I'd like also to thank our audiences for partaking in this event and for submitting the questions. We will be posting on the Facebook event page, as well as our social channels, that document that I was talking about that will have all of today's useful information. And also you will have the opportunities to submit your questions through our socials. And there you can ask your questions, and our speakers could then give you some feedback. I hope you all have enjoyed this discussion as we did. Thank you for watching the event, and please look out for more events that are curated by the BFI Film Academy Young Programmers. And yeah, thanks so much. Thank you, Sophie. Thank you, Justin. Thank you so much, Sam, as well. It was a lovely conversation with everyone.